What if everything you've built, your discipline, your identity, your sense of control, could collapse in just a few seconds? Not because you're weak, not because you didn't try hard enough, but because you were training the wrong thing all along. If you're watching this, chances are you've had a moment like that, a moment where everything was on the line. And instead of rising, you froze. Your mind went silent, your body refused to respond, and afterward, the question haunted you. What's wrong with me? Here's the truth most people never hear. The problem was never your effort. It was never your potential. It was the system you were using to build yourself. Miyamoto Musashi once wrote, "You can only fight the way you practice." But what he didn't say directly is this: you can only live the way you practice too. So if you've been practicing performance, seeking validation, tying your worth to outcomes, then the moment pressure hits, you don't rise, you break. In a crowded arena, before thousands of watching eyes, a young warrior named Kaito learned this the hard way. Undefeated, disciplined, respected, 17 victories behind him, and then, in just 8 seconds, he lost everything. Not to a stronger opponent, not to a better technique, but to something far more dangerous. He lost himself. If you've ever felt like you're no longer the person you used to be, if you've ever questioned your identity after a failure, comment yes below. Because this isn't just Kaito's story. This is the path every warrior eventually walks. And by the end of this video, you won't just understand why you fall. You'll know how to rebuild from nothing. Chapter 1. The Collapse. The day everything broke. 3 days after the duel, Kaito sat alone in silence, staring at the sword he could no longer bring himself to touch. 17 victories. Years of discipline. A reputation built through pain, sacrifice, and relentless training. Destroyed. In 8 seconds. The bruises on his face had already begun to fade, but something deeper had shattered. Something he couldn't name and couldn't fix. He replayed the moment again and again. The signal to begin. The opponent stepping forward. The crowd watching. And then, nothing. No fear, no thoughts, no reaction. Just emptiness. A void where his training should have been. His body froze. His mind disappeared. And in that silence, he discovered something far more terrifying than defeat. He didn't know who he was anymore. For his entire life, Kaito had been the warrior, the disciplined one, the one who never failed. His identity wasn't something he questioned. It was something he performed every single day, training before sunrise, practicing until exhaustion, living by rules no one forced on him. But now, that identity felt like a lie, because if it were real, it wouldn't have shattered so easily. The next morning, he returned to training, or at least, he tried. His hands trembled as he gripped the sword. Each movement felt unnatural, disconnected, empty. His master watched quietly before speaking. "You are here, but you are not present." The words hit harder than the defeat itself. That night, for the first time in years, Kaito didn't train, and something inside him whispered, "Maybe you were never who you thought you were." And that was the moment everything truly began to fall apart. Chapter 2. The Descent. When you lose everything, including yourself. At first, Kaito told himself it was temporary, just a few days away from training, just enough time to clear his mind. But days turned into weeks, and weeks slowly became something darker. He stopped going to the dojo. At first it felt like relief, like removing a weight he had been carrying for years. No expectations, no pressure, no need to prove anything. But that relief didn't last, because when the structure disappeared, so did he. Without training, without discipline, without the identity he had built his life around, Kaito didn't know what to do with himself. So he did nothing. He slept through the mornings he once owned. He wandered through the nights he once feared wasting. And slowly, almost without noticing, he began to numb the noise inside his head. A drink, to silence the questions. Another, to forget the failure, until forgetting became the only thing he was good at. People started to notice. His father confronted him one evening, voice heavy with disappointment. "You shame everything we built." Kaito didn't look up. "I already did that in 8 seconds. Silence filled the room. "You can rebuild," his father said. Kaito shook his head slowly. "You don't understand. I don't know what to rebuild anymore." Because that was the truth he couldn't escape. The warrior he thought he was only existed when he was winning. And without that, There was nothing left. Months passed. Kaito fell deeper. The discipline that once defined him turned into excess. The clarity he once had became fog. The purpose that guided him disappeared completely. And the worst part? He stopped feeling anything. No shame, no anger, no desire to change. Just emptiness. One night, as he stumbled through the streets alone, he caught his reflection in a dark window. For a moment, he didn't recognize the person staring back. Not because he had changed, but because there was no one there anymore. And somewhere deep inside that emptiness, a quiet question began to rise. If I'm not who I used to be, then who am I now? Chapter 3. The Encounter. The truth that breaks you. To rebuild you. Kaito hit rock bottom on a cold night he barely remembered. Collapsed in a narrow alley, body weak, mind empty. He hadn't eaten in days. Not because he chose not to, but because nothing felt worth doing anymore. That's when someone found him. An old man, simple robe, eyes sharp, but calm. You're dying, the man said. Kaito let out a weak laugh. Good. The man shook his head. Not from hunger, from absence. Kaito frowned slightly. You've removed yourself from your own life, while still breathing. Those words didn't sound like judgment. They sounded like truth. Who are you? Kaito asked. Someone who walked the same path you're on, the man replied, and reached the end of it. Kaito's voice was barely a whisper. And what's at the end? The old man looked at him for a long moment. Death or rebirth? Your choice. Silence. Then he turned and began to walk away. If you want the other path, come find me. For reasons he couldn't explain, Kaito went. 3 days later, he arrived at a quiet temple, unsure why he was there, unsure if anything could change. The old man was waiting. Sit. No explanation, no lecture, just silence. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Kaito's mind resisted everything. Restlessness, anger, confusion. Finally he broke. Why am I here? The old man opened his eyes. Because you lost yourself. Kaito nodded slowly. Yes. No, the man said firmly. The problem is, you think there was ever a self to lose. Kaito froze. I don't understand. You built an identity, the man continued, on victories, on discipline, on what others saw in you. He leaned forward slightly. But tell me, were those things truly you, or just what you did? Kaito had no answer. The silence this time was different. He wasn't empty anymore. He was confronting something real. You don't need to rebuild who you were, the man said quietly. That person was never stable to begin with. Then what do I do? Kaito asked. The old man's voice softened. You start from nothing. And for the first time in months, Kaito felt something return. Not confidence, not certainty, but something more powerful. The possibility of beginning again. Chapter 4. The Understanding. Why you broke, and why you can rise again. Weeks passed in silence. No advanced training, no complex technique. Just simple actions, repeated with full attention. Sitting, breathing, moving. At first, it felt pointless. Kaito wanted answers. He wanted to fix himself. He wanted to become who he used to be. But the old man Shinra never allowed it. One morning, after hours of practice, Kaito finally spoke. I don't understand how this helps me become stronger. Shinra looked at him calmly. That's because you're still chasing strength, instead of understanding weakness. Kaito frowned. I wasn't weak. I trained harder than anyone. Yes, Shinra nodded. And that is exactly why you broke. Silence. You built your identity on outcomes, Shinra continued. Victories, recognition, being seen as strong. He drew a line in the sand. When your value depends on things you cannot control, you become a prisoner of those things. Kaito felt the weight of those words settle in. So when you lost, Shinra said, you didn't just lose a duel. You lost the foundation of who you believed you were. Kaito's breath slowed. That's why everything collapsed. Shinra continued, his voice steady. Your mind was never trained for failure, only for winning. And when reality didn't match your identity, your system shut down. Kaito remembered that moment clearly now. Not fear, not panic, just nothing. A complete system failure, Shinra said, what modern minds would call overload. He tapped Kaito's chest lightly. Your brain builds patterns based on repetition. Every day you practiced winning, you reinforced that identity. But you never practiced losing. You never practice staying present when things fall apart. Kaito looked down. So I was fragile. No, Shinra interrupted. You were conditioned. And anything conditioned can be rebuilt. Kaito looked up, something shifting in his eyes. How? Shinra stood, brushing the dust from his robes. By changing what you practice. Not winning. Not perfection. Not being seen as strong. He paused. Presence. When you train yourself to stay present, regardless of outcome, you remove the fear of losing. And when there is no fear, there is no collapse. Kaito felt something click. For the first time, the problem made sense. He hadn't failed because he was weak. He failed because he had never trained for reality. And now, for the first time in his life, he was ready to start doing exactly that. Chapter 5. The first transformation. The moment you stop performing. 4 months into the training, Shinra approached Kaito with something different. A traveler has arrived, he said calmly. A warrior. Skilled. Experienced. He seeks a duel. Kaito felt it instantly. That old tension, that familiar fear rising from deep inside. I'm not ready, he said. Shinra looked at him, unshaken. Ready for what? Kaito hesitated. To win. Shinra shook his head slightly. That is the old pattern speaking. Silence. I'm not asking if you can win, Shinra continued. I'm asking, can you be present? Kaito's breath slowed. Not win. Not prove. Not redeem himself. Just be there. The question changed everything. After a long pause, he nodded. I'll do it. The next morning, they stood in the temple courtyard. No crowd, no pressure, just 2 warriors. And the moment between them, the opponent stepped forward. Confident, composed. Kaito bowed, and for a brief second, the past tried to return. The arena, the failure, the freeze. But this time something was different. He didn't fight it. He didn't try to suppress it. He simply noticed it, and returned to his breath. Here. Now, the duel began. The first strike came fast. Kaito moved. Not perfectly, not strategically, but naturally. There was no voice in his head, no calculation, no performance. Just response. Moment by moment, the fight continued. 3 minutes passed. Blows exchanged. Openings missed. Movements imperfect, but alive. And then it ended. No clear winner. No dramatic finish. Just 2 warriors. Breathing. Present. The opponent stepped back and bowed deeply. You didn't fight like someone trying to win, he said. You fought like someone who was already complete. Kaito said nothing, because for the first time, he understood. The victory wasn't the duel. It was this. He didn't freeze. He didn't disappear. He stayed. Afterward, Shinra approached. How do you feel? Kaito searched for the answer. Not proud, not ashamed. He looked at his hands. Just here. Shinra nodded. That is your first transformation. Not becoming stronger, becoming real. And in that moment, Kaito realized something he had never understood before. Mastery isn't about becoming someone better. It's about no longer needing to pretend you already are. Chapter 6. The discipline. Rebuilding what cannot break. Transformation didn't happen in a single moment. It wasn't the duel. It wasn't the realization. It was what came after. The next morning, Kaito woke before dawn. No motivation. No excitement. Just a quiet decision. He sat, breathing, still, present, then training. Basic forms. Slow movements. No perfection. Just attention. This became his life. Every day followed the same rhythm. Wake. Sit. Train. Work. Reflect. Sleep. No variation. No negotiation. At first, his mind resisted. This is repetitive. This is too simple. You should be doing more. But Kaito had learned something important. That voice wasn't truth. It was habit. So he stopped arguing with it. He simply returned, again and again, to the moment. Sweep the floor. Just sweep. Eat the food. Just eat. Hold the sword. Just hold. What once felt meaningless became powerful, because for the first time in his life, he wasn't splitting himself. No performance, no comparison, no future projection, just action. And slowly, something changed. The exhaustion he once carried disappeared. Not because he rested more, but because he stopped wasting energy. There was no internal conflict anymore. No second voice judging every movement. Only presence, one action at a time. Weeks became months. The discipline deepened. Not forced. Not dramatic. Quiet. Consistent. Unshakable. One evening after practice, Shinra spoke. This is how identity is rebuilt. Not through intensity, but through repetition. Not through motivation, but through rhythm. Kaito listened carefully. You are no longer trying to become someone, Shinra continued. You are becoming what you do, every day. Kaito looked at his hands. They no longer trembled. Not because he had conquered fear, but because fear no longer controlled him. And in that moment, he understood something most people never realize. You don't rise to the occasion. You fall to your training. And for the first time, Kaito knew exactly where he would fall. Into presence, into stability, into something that could not break. Chapter 7. The Return. Facing the moment that broke you. 1 year later, Shinra gave Kaito a final instruction. It's time to return. Kaito understood immediately. Not to the dojo, not to training, but to the place where everything fell apart. The arena. The same ground where he had frozen. Where he had lost not just a duel, but himself. As he stepped into the space again, nothing had changed. The structure, the silence, the weight of expectation in the air. But this time, he was different. No story in his head, no need to prove anything. Just awareness. Then fate completed the circle. Across the arena stood the same man, the Ronin who had defeated him. Their eyes met. No anger, no resentment, only recognition. They bowed. The duel began. The first strike came fast. Kaito moved. No hesitation. No overthinking, just response. The second strike, he flowed. The third, still present. There was no battle inside his mind anymore. No voice asking, what if you fail again? No pressure to redeem the past. Because the past no longer existed here. Only this moment. The duel unfolded like water moving around stone. Unpredictable, effortless, alive. Minutes passed, neither dominating, neither collapsing, until finally, they stopped, not because someone had won, but because there was nothing left to prove. The Ronin lowered his weapon. You've changed, he said. Kaito nodded slightly. I stopped trying to be who I was. Silence. Then the Ronin bowed deeply. This time you didn't fight. Kaito answered quietly. I didn't need to, and that was it. Not a victory, not a redemption. Something deeper. Completion. Because the real battle had never been against the opponent. It was against the version of himself that needed to win. And now that version was gone. As Kaito walked away from the arena, he felt no pride, no relief, just stillness. Because for the first time, he hadn't tried to become anything. He had simply shown up. And that was the one thing that could never be taken from him. Conclusion. The truth about losing yourself and finding your way back. Kaito's story isn't about a duel. It's not about failure. And it's not even about redemption. It's about something much deeper. The realization that the person you think you are is often just a role you've been practicing, built on success, maintained by validation, protected by control. And the moment life takes that away, you don't just lose the result, you lose yourself. But here's the truth most people never understand. That loss is not the end. It's the beginning. Because the version of you that collapsed was never built to last. It was built on conditions, and anything built on conditions will eventually break. So the real question isn't, how do I get back to who I was? The real question is, who am I when I stop pretending to be someone? Kaito didn't rebuild his old identity. He didn't try to become the undefeated warrior again. He did something far more powerful. He let that version of himself die. And then, he started from nothing. One breath, one movement, one moment at a time. No performance, no comparison, no attachment to outcome, just practice. Because in the end, you are not your victories. You are not your failures. You are what you do, consistently, when nobody is watching. So if you feel lost right now, good, because that means the illusion is breaking. And underneath it is something real, something stable, something unshakable, but only if you're willing to build it. Slowly, patiently, honestly. If this story resonated with you, comment, I'm back, or yes, because the path forward is simple, not easy, but simple. Show up, be present, practice daily, That's it. The choice is yours. Only action produces results. Be present, walk with honor and faith, and follow our path.